Hi everyone, welcome back to the Reclaiming Bossy podcast. Today we're joined by the brilliant Lucy Scarlett and we're going to talk about all things mind, body, breathwork and connection. Stay tuned because this conversation is going to be super interesting and it's exactly what you need for the new year and a new reset. I am so excited to have this chat with you. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Reclaiming Bossy. Can you please start by introducing yourself to someone as if you have never met them?
Yes. So, hi, I'm so happy to be here. My name is Lucy, and I am a mind and breath coach. So, I help people to understand themselves better, to reach their goals faster through the mind body connection.
That's incredible. And I feel like mindset and breathwork are things that are slowly becoming buzzwords on social media. So, how would you explain it to someone who has never really understood or taken the time to try mindset or breathwork tools?
So, I think it's really important to understand how they operate side by side because the mind and the body work together. But I think so often, um, like you said there, the mindset and breathwork are real buzzwords, but I think they have kind of taken their own path. And I think mindset is probably more developed than breathwork. Breathwork is definitely something that is coming to the forefront more recently. But I first became a mindset coach, and what I realized is in order to change and transform, or in order to change behavior, in order to transform or do something different to what you've always done, that requires understanding stuff that sits within our subconscious, because 90% of everything that we do comes from our subconscious awareness, not what we're consciously thinking about every day. And so I've worked with loads of people just on the mindset level, and I think it can be so transformative. But what I realized and within my own journey is we don't just operate from our mind. There is so much the thing is gut feeling. We know when we feel something and when that pulls us towards doing something. We feel love, we feel connection, we feel when something doesn't feel right. And I think in this generation, we've become so desensitized by this intuition that lives within our body. And so the way I describe it is you've got three centers, three intelligence centers within the body. You've got the mind, you've got the gut or the nervous system, and then you've got the heart. And so the mind is all around logically thinking. It's about strategizing. It's about helping us to understand how we're going to do something.
Mm.
The heart is about the emotional center. It's understanding purpose. It's understanding love. It's understanding the things that really show up passion and being able to truly express that. Because when we can do something in its fullest expression, its fullest form, that's when we really feel like we're living and we really feel connected to something.
Yeah.
And then our gut or our nervous system, that's our inner wisdom, that's our intuition, that's the felt sense of being aligned with something. That's when we can snap into like being in a flow state or feeling like something is is pulling us in the right direction.
Yeah.
And these things, the mind becomes so strong because of so many different reasons. But when we can tap into these other intelligence centers and start to listen to them more, they can guide us in ways that can help us, one, feel more connected with what we're doing, but also have more clarity about decisions and not keep repeating patterns that maybe are keeping us stuck from moving forward.
This is so fascinating and something that I find really confusing at times because if you have these three voices, imagine like a little DJ booth thing, I feel like my mind voice is like ramped up, the volume is like "Wah." And then in terms of like listening to your gut and your heart, I think a question I often ask myself is like, is it anxiety or is it intuition? Because I can't tell, like I'll get this like panic and I'll like want to make a decision or I would just won't know if this is the right decision to make or that kind of thing. And so for the people who don't know how to listen to the different voices and how to turn different channels down to be able to hear different voices within themselves, what advice do you have?
Okay. So I think the voice of the mind, and more specifically the egoic mind, the mind that creates this self concept that we are separated from everything else in the world. It likes to put things into boxes. This is right, this is wrong. You have arrived, you're not there. Yeah, you've failed, you've achieved. It's black and white in nature. And when we are in a state of stress, which, to be honest, so many of us are constantly living in stress. So people say, like you may have just said, they're like, I can't listen to the different voices. Your nervous system might just always be in activated. It might always be in this state of fight or flight, which naturally, like, the signals then get blurred because you're in hypervigilance, which is going to switch on the mind, because the mind is designed to keep you alive. That's why the human race has been so successful, because we've got this mind that can rationalize, that can problem solve, but we need to be able to down regulate that. And so what that looks like is, when people say they have the best thoughts being in the shower, it's like, because that is a time where you've got the warm water falling on your skin. You probably, I mean, I hope you haven't got your phone in the shower. And it's this chance for your body to catch up with your mind. And when that happens, we start to have these new ideas, these new thoughts, these new ways of being, that maybe when we're on autopilot going from thing to thing, because we're constantly in this fear, like in this survival state, we're not going to be having them thoughts. And so that is how I would first describe. So the brain is when you're in this problem solving mode. The intuition is like having the creative thoughts within the shower, and you feel it, and you know something is right when you have that, like, aha moment. And then from the heart center, that is falling in love. We don't rationally fall in love. And for anyone, I mean, for anyone that hasn't fallen in love, you can still have this, like, deep love for your family, for a hobby. You don't rationalize that. You don't think about the ways of why you should love that. But there is definitely this feeling, and people just disregard it so often. But that's the most tangible thing I can think of, is falling in love. You don't reason with that. You just feel it and you know it.
I know you said you don't reason with it, but could you describe it to someone? Because a little bit of gossip, but I feel like I'm falling in love for the first time in my life right now, in this period of my life. And I'm not sure what it is, because I've never felt it before. But because I've never felt it before, I'm starting to think that it could be. But I think it's so interesting because everyone has a very individual concept of what love means to them. And so, as someone who works specifically with kind of connecting and aligning the mind, the body, the gut, the soul, what would you describe as like being like in your heart and like loving someone?
So what I would say is, when you are coming from your heart center, and also when I talk about this, I just want to caveat, this can start sounding a bit woo-woo, and I am not necessarily a woo-woo person, but this is, if everyone just thinks about this and thinks about something they've loved, they will be able to notice this. It's just we choose not to. But when you're in love, you're usually present with whatever or whoever that is. It takes you into this present moment. We're not worrying about the future. We're not worrying about the past. And now you might think, oh, well, I'm in love and I am worrying about, am I still going to be in love? I'm still going to be with this person in the future. Oh no, because that's your heart. Your head has now kicked into gear. It's trying to tell you, is this going to end? Is it going to be forever? Are you in danger in that moment? But when you are in that present state and you say you're falling in love, you feel it within your body, and you feel this, like, grounded, centered feeling coming out of the thoughts of what you've got to do. And it's almost like time disappears. Um, and you can generate that in work. You can generate that in life. And I think I use the idea of falling in love because it is such it's this overwhelming feeling. But when we're talking about connecting the mind and body together, it's just about bringing your awareness back into the body, back into the sensations, and understanding the emotions that are attached to them. And when we can tap into that, we can also start to understand our sources of joy. And then when you can tap into joy, that can again bring you back to the present moment. And when we're thinking about, becoming unstuck or taking your business to the next stage, it's likely not going to be because you don't know what to do. It's going to be actually putting yourself and embodying that change that you know you need to make. And then when you're in there, embodying being the best version of yourself. And that probably looks like taking on these feelings of joy, taking on these feelings of presence and entering into this flow state. And I think that involves being in this presence of love and joy.
I love that. And like you were saying earlier, I think we risk being a little bit like wishy-washy woo-woo when we talk about these things, and that alienates certain people because they feel either maybe not the most spiritually inclined, and they're very like science people, but there's a lot of neuroscience behind some of the things that you're talking about. And if someone's watching and they've never done anything around like being centered in their heart or doing any breath work or kind of connecting the mind to the body, what would you say is the first step into getting into like a more psychosomatic approach and being embodied as well?
I would say there's a few different things that you can do, and I think it really depends on where someone's at within their journey.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say for some people, just pausing and bringing your attention to your breath can be the first step. But what I would also say is, if you've lived in your head for years and years and years, if you lived this attachment of what life should be, or like what you must be doing, like the shoulds and the musts are really like attached to your identity, and you want to start thinking about a different way of being, that isn't going to be you sit down and you meditate for 10 minutes and all at sea you're going to be a completely heart-centered person and everything is going to start being rosy and amazing. It just doesn't work like that. And I think in today's society, we're looking for quick fixes. So often we're looking for like the next AI strategy to take time off us. But really, no one's got any more time back. Like we've got all of these AI things. No one's got time back. So when we're thinking of entering into this more somatic experience, there's the different things. So I describe it as, imagine we're all like buckets, and our bucket, we've all got buckets, they're all different sizes, and they represent us. And the water in the bucket is our capacity. So it's the amount of things we've got on, it's the stress, it's our ability to cope. And so many people are operating with a bucket that is like almost overflowing. And when we get to that point of overflowing, that's when we start getting snappy. It's when burnout starts to happen. So you might start feeling exhausted, your energy levels go down, you can't operate like you used to. And so it's about, how do we, one, stop pouring out some of that water in the bucket and then not letting that get all the way up to the top. So if something does happen, or if you think about within business being an entrepreneur, things are always going up and down. But because your bucket isn't full, you can take on that extra load because you also know how to empty it. But as well as that, it's not just about emptying out the bucket all the time. It's also about making the bucket bigger.
Yeah.
And so if we think about the capacity in the buckets and how we can approach that with the making the bucket bigger, this is all about daily practice. So we don't want to do a quick fix, and it's about understanding where you can take time of the day to let go of whatever autopilot pattern that you're on and be with yourself. And that might look like sitting down to meditate for 10 minutes. That might look like breath work for 10 minutes. But it also might just be feeling your feet on the ground or brushing your teeth and actually noticing the bristles on each tooth, or getting into bed and feeling the sheets and just taking your mind away from the constant monologue that you have in your head and bringing it back to the present moment. And I think there is, I think with social media as well and the rise of like wellness and well-being and this way of being that is well, that is one person's blueprint for what works for them. And I think if people want to go on this journey of understanding themselves better, of making change, of dipping their toe into something that is different to what they've always done, don't just watch social media and like take a blueprint. It's about testing out different things. So I wouldn't want to say that there's one way of doing it, but a good starting point is throughout the day, just start to notice and notice where your energy is in different points of the day. For some people, they wake up, they have a really anxious mind, they have racing thoughts. For some people, they wake up and they're really good. And over the day, the volume of that turns up and up and up and up. So what you're going to do for each different person is going to be different. But the goal of all of this is getting ourselves out of our head and into our body. That you need to learn the habit of cutting that system or that monologue that is going round and round constantly that's keeping us on autopilot. That is the first place to start.
I love that. And I feel like I've been on this journey personally this year because I started my own company. And what you were saying about the bucket, I was thinking for me, it's not taking water out of the bucket, it's making the bucket bigger. And that's what you said. And I really feel like this has been the year of making my bucket bigger because the volume of the water has also got a lot more. Because I work with a team and there's lots of challenges that come up. And when I started, I used to take everything as a sign. Oh my God, this didn't work out. It's a sign I'm meant to fail. Oh my God, this didn't happen. It's a sign I'm meant to stop doing this and whatever. And then over time, learning to pattern interrupt those things. And you can't outthink yourself out of a negative spiral and using different practices. And I have more awareness around what my bucket expanders are. But as someone who is a coach, what would you say are options that people can explore as both bucket drainers and bucket expanders so they can maybe take away and try different things? Like, for example, I like journaling. We're going to talk about breathwork. It's not something that's worked for me in the past, but I'm definitely open to talking about different ways of doing it. But for me, it's journaling, EFT tapping, and visualization.
Yeah.
Those are things that work for me. But there's a big menu of different things that people can try. So what are other ones that you recommend?
Yeah. So with my approach, and I perhaps should have mentioned this earlier, because I do mind and body, it's about understanding that you need the two side by sides to actually understand how everything relates to each other. So with mindset, the idea is we have subconscious beliefs that will generate automatic thoughts, which will create emotions, which will then create certain actions that give us certain outcomes. And that outcome is likely to influence the belief again. And it's a cycle. And so that is a top-down approach. And so the idea with top-down is that we question the thought, we understand the belief. So that means that we can start to generate new thoughts, which generate a new emotion, which generate a new action. So we've got that side, but then the bottom-up approach is understanding that if our nervous system is dysregulated, if we're not breathing and we're constantly holding our breath and we're constantly tense, the likelihood is how we respond to things in a moment is going to be affected by how we are in our body. And I think everyone can relate to times like that when you've gone from thing to thing to thing, you haven't stopped, you need a break, and then something happens. And if you had been in your body and relaxed, you maybe would have approached it differently. And I've pretty much guaranteed that everyone can reflect back and think of a time where they felt like that. And so when we're thinking about these bucket drainers and bucket fillers, we also need to think about then two things side by side, because if you want to be journaling, but you might have quite a negative take on some of the things that you're journaling about. But with the bottom up approach, it's also about how you're feeling in the body. Because yes, there might be where you're really tense and where you're really heightened, but there might be times where you just really flat. You've got no energy, you've got no motivation. And so one of my favorite things that I have picked up recently is shaking. I love a shake. And what do I mean by shake? This is just play your favorite song. I actually like drum beats. Um, and it's almost like a dance, but 2 minutes. And obviously, if you're in an office, probably not going to bother. I mean, you could do it.
Go to the bathroom.
Yeah, go wherever. I'd do it in front of anyone. I don't really care. But and you just shake your body and you move. You're moving stuff around. I'm not not going to say energy. People hate that word, but you're just activating stale. If you've been sitting down, if you've been in your head, you breathe deeply into your belly and you move. You shake your hands. You shake your shoulders. And if you do that for 2 minutes, I guarantee when you sit down, your physiological state will have changed. And so when you do that, you can then access more positive thoughts, or you can connect back to what you're doing with more presence rather than being slightly disconnected. So that's another great one that I would recommend. But the other one that I love and I do most mornings is I think condensed style of Wim Hof breathing. So this is an activating breath, and it's an active inhale and an active exhale. So it's like this, and I do that for 10 breath, hold for 10, then I do 20, hold for 20, and then do 30 and hold for 30. And then I go back into normal breathing. And I think that, and I've done this with a lot of my clients, and they love that because it takes 5 to 10 minutes. But a lot of people, and this is one of the reasons why I actually got into breath work, because I have always done yoga, got into meditation. Obviously, you do Shavasana at the end, and loved all of it. And then when I got into coaching, and people were coming up to me saying, "No, look, like I was working with them, they were burnt out. They wanted better routine. They felt like their mind was busy." I obviously jumped to being and saying, "Okay, let's hit a meditation practice in, guided meditation practice," and they couldn't do it. And I was really shocked at the beginning. I was like, I didn't realize how difficult people found just sitting and being with themselves. But what breathwork does, and that form, which I think is so great, is it gives their mind something to think about. But while they're thinking about breathing, you can then connect with the body, which automatically quiets the mind. And so what people find is once they've done them 3 rounds, they can then feel their body, and they notice that the loudness of their thoughts has been toned down. So then they can go into this meditative state. So it's almost like a gateway. It's like a gateway drug to meditation. And so that's another thing that I would say that's really good for making the bucket bigger.
That's awesome. I'm going to try that later. And I want to ask you, is there a correct and incorrect way to breathe? Because I feel like my intuition is telling me that I don't breathe correctly. And I breathe quite shallowly. And I'm quite an anxious person, and I feel like that translates. And so for all the people who are anxious girlies that are watching, like, do you think that potentially if they tried breathing a bit differently, they'd feel better? And I remember when we had our first phone call, I told you the first time I tried breathwork, I had a panic attack because I was like, oh my God, my body's like not used to this amount of oxygen. And then I just couldn't do it again for months because I was like, I don't want to feel like that again. Like, that was really scary. And so what advice would you have for people who've never done it before and are a bit scared to try it because it's just intimidating?
So what it sounded like there is your brain switched into gear and almost then started to tell you, this is wrong, this is bad, you don't like this. And you're in that hypervigilance again. Something's wrong here. I don't like it. I don't like the way I feel. So maybe at one, and obviously this is a guess, but maybe at some point where you were doing that breathing, your mind started to take control of your experience, because it's breathing, right? We're in control of it. It is the gateway to our autonomic nervous system. We can turn it up and we can turn it down. And I'm just wondering here, was when you were doing that breath work, were you thinking while you were doing it, I need to do this right. I need to be breathing in this certain way and I'm not allowed to stop. So again, you left yourself, you didn't give yourself what you needed. Your brain kicked in and said, I need to perform, like performs like I need to do it right. This is how I need to do it. And so when I talk about breath work, I talk about it as you are in control. It's not like I can set the guidelines, but ultimately it's about how you relate to your breath. And I think you said there about like, are we breathing properly? Breath work is like an umbrella term. It's like saying I'm going to go to yoga, but one person might go to yoga and it might be a yoga nidra class where they're basically falling asleep. Or you might go to an Ashtanga class and you're doing like handstands and back bends and it's really fiery and you're doing a proper workout. And if you just said yoga, it could be a spectrum of different things. And breathwork is very similar. It's everything from the awareness of just noticing the automatic nature of your breath, feeling your belly rise and fall, being mindful in that moment, to conscious connected breath work, which is what I'm trained in, which is a therapeutic style of breath, which is a lot more immersive and can have a lot of quite significant outcomes for people's mental and psychological states. So I guess it depends on what you're talking about there. But if we're thinking about breathing in general, most of us, unless you have really worked on it, in modern day society, unfortunately have some form of dysfunctional breathing. And I think this is very clear when you look at a newborn baby. So when you look at a newborn baby and a baby's asleep, you see their belly really expanding, and I don't breathe like that. But that's how when we are born, that's how we were designed to breathe. And the way I think about this is over time, we go through the world and things happen to us. We have different experiences, we have different memories, we have different ways that we respond to something. And if you think about, let's give the example of if you step out to the road and a car's there and you haven't seen them, and the car slams its brakes on. What are you likely to do? You likely to go, and you tense your body and you hold your breath. And if you think about that over years and years and years, when we're in environments that we find stressful, we hold our body and we tense our breath. And so if we're constantly either perceiving environments as stressful or never addressing that breathing pattern, we end up freezing parts of our body, freezing the way that we breathe. And so that the way that we then breathe, I think it's shallow if you're holding your breath, that in itself is sending signals to your mind that you are stressed or that you are dysregulated. And so that is where we go back into that bottom up approach. When we can breathe more fully and more deeply, we can feel more fully and deeply. And when we feel more fully, when we can feel these spectrum of emotions that come when we breathe, we can then live more fully. Because if you think about it, I think when we speak about nervous system or mindset, a really easy way to relate to it is like thinking about the physical body in the gym. So if you think about someone being really stiff and really immobile, they're not going to be able to do a load of activities. So they're not really going to really experience like the breadth of what it is to like enjoy moving your body.
Yeah.
But as you develop that, as you become stronger, as you become more flexible, that then opens you up to more things that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So then you start enjoying it more because you're like, oh, I can do this, or I can do this, or I can do this. And so because you enjoy that more, that motivates you to do more. And if you think of the breath as the same, once we can expand the breath, once we can breathe more deeply and more fully, the way that we start relating to things starts changing as well.
I love that. And to take your gym metaphor a little bit further, just like you are supposed to, I don't often do, I'm not gonna lie, warm up and cool down at the gym.
Yeah.
Is there an equivalent for breathwork practices? Like, is there stuff that you should do so that you don't just like go into it and it's intense and you feel bad afterwards?
What breathwork are you referencing here?
Let's talk about what is conscious connected breathwork, and how did you get into it? Because it's something that I'm unfamiliar with. When you say breathwork, I think Wim Hof. That's the only one that I've
Yeah.
experienced, and like I said, it freaked me. It gave me a panic attack, and so I've never tried anything else. Oh, well, yes.
Um, so conscious connected breathwork is a therapeutic style of breathwork that is usually around 60 to 90 minutes, and it is you're lying down and usually with a blanket or a pillow, and there is someone guiding you through this style of breath, usually to music as well. I always like the immersive music. And what this does is you're breathing in and out through the mouth usually. So it's quite activating. So you're waking up the nervous system. And by doing this style of breath, and it's called circular breathing. So it's an intentional inhale and then letting it go. But the most important thing is there's no gaps in between breath. You're just continuously breathing. And you can also have breath holds in there. And the reason why this is so powerful is because your brain is constantly being brought back to the breath, which is being brought back to the present moment. And what that does is initially you might start to feel uncomfortable. Your brain will start to switch on. It might start to say, I don't like this. It'll say, oh, my mouth's dry, I can't do this. And it is in that moment that you continue to breathe, that you bring yourself back to the breath. Because what you're teaching yourself is it is safe to breathe, it is safe to feel, it is safe to be here in this moment and be and breathe really fully. And so once you do that for a while, what you start to notice is that the mind starts to turn itself down. So, like I mentioned with the short condensed Wim Hof that I do in the morning, this is like a more intense version of it. And then when your brain starts to turn down, you'll then start to notice different sensations within the body. So you're really tapping into that wisdom that the body has. And what can happen in that moment is you then start to release tension. And so when you release tension, I'm not talking about like your glute becoming more relaxed. It's the tension that sits within the fascial tissues down to like a cellular level. And with what I spoke about earlier, we're constantly uh, moving through these different situations, which means we have these holding patterns in life. We can start to release these holding patterns. We can start to actually let go and surrender to being in the present moment. And what can happen when you do that is you can start to have emotional expression. And emotional expression is basically just the energy. So, and when I talk about energy, when we have a thought, it links to an emotion. And that emotion will usually, if you fully feel an emotion, it lasts about 8 seconds in your body. But we also, when we're holding our breath and tensing our body and having that emotion, we're usually not expressing that emotion either. So we're not, if let's go back to the example of the car and stepping out in front of the road, you might have had the urge to squeak, but you didn't squeak. You just held it within your body. And so these are like literally chemical signals that are being sent around the body and just getting trapped. And so if we think so if think of the word energy and then not energy, if we think of the word emotion, that is emotion, energy in motion. And so what can happen is when we're breathing and we're starting to change the amount of CO2 within our blood and change the concoction that we have, this then also allows for different sensation for different things to start happening. And so when that happens and we then start to release the tension, that's when the emotional expression can come. But what that's doing is, again, it's pouring. This is complete. This is what happens when you pour the water out. So what we were talking about previously is making the bucket bigger. Now we're talking about how do you just pour the bucket, like just pour the water out the bucket. And this is what happens when you do conscious connected breath work. And so that's why I say doing both side by side together is when you're truly going to start to see transformational change, because it's it's getting the stuff out that you wouldn't be able to do in 10 minutes.
That's awesome. I have tried something like this, but without the breath, more like sound healing, meditation kind of stuff. And it brought up memories that I forgot I had. And I remember it happening, and then I was with my family. We very woke family went to sound healing all together. My dad was the one who signed us all up, and we like did that. Um, and when we came back, I cried for 2.5 hours on the train on the way back home, and they were like, "Why are you acting like this?" And it just brought up a lot of memories that I forgot I'd had, and it was like traumatic is not the right word, but it was just really like opening in a way that maybe I hadn't expected and I hadn't anticipated. So is there advice that you have for people just to like contain, like where does that water go basically? Like you don't pour it onto the floor and then you have to like mop the floor up. How can they create a container to safely put that water somewhere, whether it's journaling, whether it's like aftercare practices, whether it's like speaking to someone? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I would say so when I do sessions in person, there's always there's different stages to how I run a session. So you have the grounding, then you have the build. So that's when we start the conscious connected breath. Then you reach the peak, and then you come down back into a gentle breath where you're not controlling it. And that's usually where if the tears come, they come. And I think it's really important before you leave the space, and something that I am quite passionate about actually, but it's not being done, or I don't see it being done in breathwork practices enough, but like enough space at the end to really come back, ground yourself, start to understand and process what's gone on, and actually sharing, speaking to it with other people. What I love so much is when I do sessions, and this is why I'm now building out these day workshops. When we think about going back to opening up the heart, when people come out for breathwork session, they just want to talk about it to the from my experience, I just want to talk to other people about what did you experience? This came up for me, and people all of a sudden, because they're not in their heads anymore, they're in their hearts and they're in their bodies. They're so much more open to sharing, and I think that there's so much beauty in that, because if you can share something and someone else can relate to it in something that they've experienced, you're then forming connection over that. And I know that's not always possible because you may be doing it. I do online sessions, and yeah, I say journaling whatever came up, whatever came up in that moment, and just really um, taking care of yourself like 24 hours after. Because how I describe it, and I was speaking to a girl the other day that came to one of my sessions, and she was like, Lucy, the next day I was just absolutely exhausted. It really took it out of me, but she didn't I could see, because when I'm facilitating, I can see on people's faces, and I can see if there's something they're like, something needs to come, but their body either doesn't feel safe enough, or their mind is still running the show and trying to resist it. But usually I can see, and I could see that there was something that she needed to let go of, and she didn't quite get there. And because she didn't get there, if you think about it, it's like shaking a Coke bottle, but not opening it. And so the fears doesn't, like, it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm sure, yeah. And so when we cry, there's actually cortisol in our tears. So, um, so you're getting rid of stress through your tears. But if you feel that needs to come up and it doesn't happen, that's when you might start to feel a bit tired or a bit weary. And it's just about noticing and being compassionate for yourself in that moment.
That's awesome. I want to, because we're like running out of time a little bit, I want to talk more about the business side
Yeah.
of how can people use this not just to open their hearts, but to really create transformative change in their work and in other areas of their life as well. Like, why should people implement this practice?
So I think something that is being massively missed out in the entrepreneurial space, in corporate spaces, is the the more common use of somatic practices in order to create change and in order to create better performance. And the reason for this is when you're doing conscious connected breath work and your brain is switched off, and your brain being responsible for um, doubt, for fear, for hypervigilance, for the thing that stops you from switching off, the thing that is blocking your creativity, when you can turn the dial down on that, you can get really profound answers to what actually needs to be done and what the problem or the challenge actually is. And this is where, even in my own business, I've come to realizations through conscious connected breathwork. And this isn't actively thinking about something. This is a voice that has such conviction and knowing that something needs to change, or this is what you need to let go of. And it's a deeper voice. It's not the noise of the shoulds and the musts. And whenever I followed that voice, it has never done me wrong, because it is the voice that is beyond the fear, beyond the shame, beyond the guilt. It's usually your like true essence of who you are and what you want. And now, when you can tap into that, when you can understand, it's not saying that you have to act straight away, but you've got that new awareness now. And that new awareness allows you to reflect on the choices that you're making differently. And then reflections allow you to have more choice. And so when we think about that within business, we're constantly having to make choices. We're constantly having to make decisions. And we know that we want to make decisions from an authentic place. We know we don't want to be making decisions based off of fear. Yet knowing how to actually do that, if we go back to what you were first saying, differentiate them voices can be really difficult. And so what this practice does is it helps you to go in and spend time figuring out the different voices. And it's almost like until you've experienced it, you won't truly know what that is. But once you start to open that up, over time, you'll get new pieces of awareness that come. And it will always be from a place that isn't driven by fear. And that is what especially entrepreneurs need now, because the world is moving so fast. Things are changing so rapidly, but you trying to constantly attach yourself to every new shiny object isn't going to be the thing that helps you get to where you want to be, not where you think you should be.
That is so powerful, and I definitely want some of that. And I'm sure many of the founders, the creatives, the business people watching this will want that. So what are the different things that you do, and how can the viewers, the listeners work with you?
Great. So everything that I've spoken about today, I've put into a framework called the Embodied Change Framework. And this is a 5-step process to helping someone understand themselves better, to make a change faster. And it starts with looking from the inside out rather than the outside in. So it's not jumping straight to what is the goal? How are we going to get there? We eventually get to that, but firstly, it's about using the mindset techniques that sit within the subconscious, giving people more context and knowledge and relation to them within whatever is going on within their business or within their work. And then using each somatic practice to slowly start to build up your toolbox when it comes to understanding yourself better, understanding your identity, understanding the parts of yourself that you have maybe pushed to the side, reclaiming them sides to yourself. Going back to the reclaiming Bossy, we had a great talk about that when we first met. And like understanding the parts of ourselves that we left behind, then experiencing that in the body. And then it goes down to eventually like mapping misalignment, to understanding where the misalignments are in your life and how you can start to alter and change them. and being in the process and feeling comfortable within it, not just looking for the outcome. I think that is track that even I do still fall into. And it's about, our brains are always going to take us to that place. And it's, how do we constantly bring ourselves back and be happy being in the grey space, being in the in between, being in the not there yet, but still being able to take a joy and contentment. And so everything within this framework, I'd work with people on a one-to-one basis, so different programs that I run. I then run full-day workshops, uh, which I'm really passionate about, because I don't think there's a lot of people doing this, where it's really bringing the mind and body together to help people relate to whatever they have going on within their lives. So this isn't just for people that are entrepreneurs or that have a business. It is for anyone that wants to come to a space and is passionate about personal development, because what I believe now is, it's not about how much you know, it's how much of that knowledge you can actually apply to your life. And I think we've got so many personal development junkies that are constantly watching the podcasts or reading the self-help books, but it's like, how much of that are you actually applying, and where are the spaces that you can apply it? Because there you might go to an event and it's a panel talk and it's talking about the exact same things that you heard on the podcast, but it's like, I want to create a space where people have taken that knowledge and they're doing the do, and they're doing it with other people, and they're connecting, and by connecting they're relating to that problem in a completely different way. So they're not coming to like know more than they already know necessarily. They might, and I hope they do, but it's about, I've actually know how to use that within my day-to-day now. And yeah,
I love that. And I'm going to link all the ways of getting in contact with you so people can do that. Not everyone will be able to do that though, maybe. And so I love giving people homework. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
I would like you to give the listeners homework. What is an action step that they can take from this conversation? You can give a few options if you want, of something that they can actually do, so they just haven't listened to us talk about mindset and breathwork and stuff, but they can actually implement something.
So I do a free community breathwork, conscious connected breathwork, once a month. So for anyone that is curious, that wants to get involved, they can join that. I think, so that emptying the bucket, I think from from making the bucket bigger, I'd say a good, if you are starting completely from the beginning, what I would like you to do is, I would like you to map out 5 different points in the day where you can take 30 seconds to bring yourself back to awareness. So this is something that you don't have to, it's not something that you are putting down on a to-do list. It is minimal. But I just want you to think about when the times are going to be, and when you do it, it's bringing yourself back to the 5 senses. So like I said before, it's when you brush your teeth, be like, I'm going to really intentionally brush my teeth today, and I'm going to feel my feet on the floor. I'm going to understand the way that I'm standing. I'm going to feel the bristles on my tongue. I'm going to feel the mint on my tongue, and think about different times in the day where you can start to separate yourself from the monologue that you have in your head. And I guarantee if you do it and you're committed to it, because consistency with this sort of work is really important. If you can stick to that, then that's a great place to start. But what I'm also doing, and I think this is going to be out by the time this goes live, is I'm doing something called the Embodied Change Challenge, and I'm doing it myself, and I'm documenting the whole journey. I'm literally starting it next week, and I probably would have already started it by now, by the time this goes out. It's a 10-week challenge, which takes my embodied change method, and each week there is a different somatic practice that you can do, and you can take a recording from, and a different journaling prompt. So every week it's going to be tapping into a different part of the embodied change method, so you can start to actively think about change that you want and start to implement it. It's like the 75 hard, but think about it from like well-being change perspective.
That is so exciting. I can't wait to do that. I love the homework. Last question. I always ask listeners, we're reclaiming Bossy here. So what does bossy mean for you? Are you reclaiming it? And what are your final takeaways?
I love the name Reclaim Bossy. It is something that actually over my journey of becoming self-employed, of stepping out of the corporate wheel, of really truly stepping into my own essence, took so much courage for me. When this happened, when I first decided that I wanted a different life, I wrote a letter to my mum and dad, telling them about why this. Because I was terrified. I was terrified that like I didn't want the lives that my parents wanted me to have, and ever since I've taken that leap, it's not been easy, but I am so happy with who I am becoming. And it's not bossy. And bossy is just that word. It, get rid of like, and I love the words from podcasts, but
Bossy is brilliant.
bossy is great. Like, but it's not bossy. It's just like being unapologetically yourself.
Yeah.
And if that comes from a place of true self, not a cloic self, and from a place of knowing who you are down to your core values, that's just going to create magic in the world.
I love that. I've taken so much from this conversation. I'm sure our listeners and viewers have as well. Thank you so much for your time. You are incredible.